Welcome to MMA Fancast. My name's Luke, and I am honored to have a friend of mine and a friend of the show, Tom Kizer, back on the show. Tom, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Always a good time to chat with you, Luke.
It's always nice to chat with you. We started chatting probably about a year ago when you were an amateur MMA fighter. I've got to watch you fight two different times live in front of me, which is wonderful. One was for an amateur 247 fighting championship title at 170 pounds, which you won against Damone Hawkins. And then you actually beat him again for your pro debut, which an incredible knockout. I had you on the show just to talk about your elbow knockout of him and your pro debut win. So that's pretty exciting. I guess we could start there just very briefly. Now that it's been a couple months, what's it like kind of looking back? Because you're about a month away from your second pro fight. So how much looking back have you done at that fight? And how much kind of focus forward are you? Because I know you're about a month out.
Well, we knew that fight was going to be different with all the different tools to use, from going from amateur to pro, right? The knees and elbows. Obviously, the elbow was a huge factor in that fight. And that's something that we're continuing on with. Those are much more dangerous weapons. That's why they don't let the amateurs use them quite as much. They don't have control over them. But again, they're useful if you do know how to use them. And that's something that we spent a lot of time on. As far as this next one goes, we're looking to keep it going right in the same direction, right? We got a KO for the first round of my pro debut, and looking for a knockout in this one too, right? It's kind of no survivors time. I'm not trying to end anybody's career or anything, but this is what I'm going to be doing. Right? I'm not looking to get a whole lot of submissions and no decisions. Right? We're trying to knock people's blocks off.
Well, you've been on the show and you were talking back when you were an amateur that you developed your amateur career. You took a lot of high level fights. You were 7-1 as an amateur, won several different amateur belts, and you really put a lot of work in. You were telling me when you were going pro that now you kind of want to speed it up because you've built this pro winning machine because of putting the work in as an amateur. You mentioned, I know you put it out there on social media, you're going to be fighting March 18th at a local casino for you, Morgantown. You're from Morgantown. Before we get to the event and all of that, you mentioned that your opponent, Miles Robinson, that you've been matched with him several times and now it's coming together. So let's just talk a little bit for people that don't know. In amateur, it happens a lot. At pro, it also happens. Fights get matched, but then they fall apart for various things. So when did you first hear his name? When did it kind of first become a possibility to fight him? And then how did it come around now?
So the first time had to have been the summer of 2021, early spring or summer of 2021, maybe. We were supposed to fight, and he had an injury. And he actually called me right out of practice. He'd just gotten done with this. Said, "Hey, look, man, we just got out of this. I'm going to the doctor right now. I think I'm going to have to pull out of this fight. I'm sorry." Which that was a classy move, right? I do appreciate that. Only person who's ever done that. And then I think the second time that we got matched up, I think the entire card got scrapped, the whole show, which is unfortunate any way that you cut it. And I had an offer to fight him again at the Columbus casino, which was actually the site of my only loss. But there was a problem I had with the Columbus casinos. They didn't have a warm up area. Basically, I mean, it was a 20 by 20 room that the entire blue corner or red corner was supposed to warm up in. It wasn't very good. And I asked him about that. And they said, "Oh no, somebody else has said something about that, but they haven't fixed it." I said, "All right, well, look, I'm out. I'm not going to fight there because that was a problem. That was a pain. And if you guys aren't going to fix it, then sorry." But now it's come all the way back around full circle, anyways. Here we go. He's an Ohio boy. He's trained out of Immortal, I believe. I know some people out that way. I've worked with some people probably from his gym before. I've never worked with him before. Again, I don't have any kind of bad blood, but this is my backyard, and I'm not looking to come and eke out a decision or something. I'm fixing to show off for my crowd.
Well, and let's get to that. I know 247, which is you fought for them a couple times. Your crowd can come up. It's only about an hour and a half away from Morgantown. But what's it like to be actually be fighting in your backyard? Something that really hasn't happened that often.
No, it's hard to get really high level shows here in Morgantown. They put on some good boxing shows here.
Mm.
The local promotion that does very well. But I'm not just a straight boxer, right? It's maybe I'll do that sometime towards the end of the career for some fun if I want to. But the focus is on MMA right now. And this was a bucket list thing, and I'm glad that I was able to get a legit opponent for it. That's really the big fear, is that I wouldn't be able to find somebody worth it to fight. But Miles is definitely worth it. Both of us are kind of on the same track. I think he's 2-0, maybe with 2 KOs. So it's going to be a nice battle to see who's really coming out on top of this one. It's going to be fun to do.
Well, and you've told me a lot. One of the reasons why I love having you on the show is because you're very straightforward. You want to put on entertaining shows, but you also want them to be a bit of a challenge, right? Because if you only fight people that you're convinced you have no chance of losing, it doesn't really push you to develop. And you talked about that with rematching an opponent you had beaten at the amateur level, that you wanted to continue to advance. You wanted to continue to push your skill. You showed your trade incredibly well, and I was honored to be cage side for that. So for you, what's important to demonstrate or show? You mentioned that you're not here for eking out decisions, but like, what are you I think you said you don't want decisions. Did you say you don't want submissions? Because I've seen you do a pretty nice arm triangle
I don't
submission.
want any submissions, right? Submissions
Okay.
on the table, right? Grappling
Yeah.
is one of my strong suits.
Right.
Um, and if I need to do it, then I need to do it. If I have the opportunity, then I'll grab it. I certainly won't just watch the opportunity pass me by there. Then I'll take it. Not trying to make it any harder on myself than it needs to be, but one of the things is people like seeing the KOs, and that'll get you noticed a lot more
Sure.
than out decisions will. You can have really good fights. They're barn burners where you're playing patty cake with somebody, and that's kind of popular sometimes too. But I don't really have a patty cake setting, right? If I'm going to hit you, then I'm going to hit you hard. Like this, I'm not trying to just dink you up and hope that gets it done. I'm going to turn your lights off so I don't have to worry about anybody else thinking that you might have gotten the better of me.
That's why I love having you on the show. You're very direct. You're very quotable. But I've seen that. I've seen that in person. The submission that I saw you get, a really nice head arm triangle, was it an amateur fight where you couldn't really do as much damage as you wanted to on the feet or on the ground? And then we've already talked through your incredible elbow, where your opponent actually kind of was unconscious, sort of over your back, because you had him up against the wall, sort of a delayed. He was out, but it was sort of delayed from what we could see, because he kind of fell over your back, and then you had to, drop him down. You were going to say something, sorry.
Yeah, the so that position where I got that submission would have been a really, really opportune place for elbows on
Elbows, yeah, yeah.
the half guard across the body with an arm, right? So I would have had an arm trapped and an elbow right on his face to be dropping down if I'd have been able to do that.
Sure. And I think that's where mixed martial arts, I try to quote him as many times as I can. But GSP, I'm kind of the biggest fan of him because he's done so many interviews. But GSP always said that he's not a fighter, he's a mixed martial artist. He would always emphasize the word artist, because you've got to kind of mix it. You've got to mix your own, just like there's only so many colors out there, but you can paint many different ways. And one of the things that you're describing is your own unique style. Is, given the position you were in, it's a great position for submissions. You pulled out a wonderful submission, but for your style, you'd much rather tie up an arm and go for those elbows that actually similar to what Johnny Bones Jones did to the janitor Vladimir Matashenko in one of his fights, where they were short, sort of chopping elbows on the head, which I think is what you're describing. And so it's really cool to kind of see your skill set develop and your style develop. Who's the first ground and pound artist that you remember seeing? For me, it was Randy the Natural Couture, really kind of made ground and pound where he'd take him down, get on top, but instead of trying to advance, he would just kind of rain from there. Sometimes even an open guard, he would still stay in there. Who do you remember kind of being a ground and pound? And is that somebody that you kind of think of as you develop?
Certainly Randy Couture has so many good techniques, right? Holding people up against the fence. He
Oh, yeah.
did. They had a special about it after he fought Brock Lesnar.
Mm.
Everybody was so surprised that he was able to make it as far as he did until Lesnar just hit him with one of those big old fucking soup can fists, and just about killed him on the spot. Good lord! But that is a position that I like to utilize as well. Leaning on people because it's not a whole lot of work on me, and it's just draining your gas tank the whole time. Um, but as far as who was the first one, he was also great at ground and pound, obviously. But the first one that really stood out to me, I think, for being kind of vicious ground and pound, and I'm not a super fan, but Tito Ortiz.
Yeah,
Tito,
yeah, he
he
would be. Yeah.
maul people on the ground, and that's exactly what we're looking to do. Maybe a little more technical than he be, but hold him down and beat him up. Like, it doesn't get much simpler.
No, and I don't know if you've heard this quote. This is a great quote I love to use from Donald Cowboy Cerrone, where he had a really good ground game, but similar to you, he wanted the striking to show. He did a lot of Muay Thai fights. I don't know if we even have a number of how many pro Muay Thai fights he had, but he was a big. But somebody asked him once, because he had pretty good submissions as well, but somebody asked him, "What's your favorite takedown?" And he said, "My favorite takedown is a knockdown." And I know that you've wrestled, you're a great wrestler. But do you have that idea too that, if you get a clean knockdown, hey, now they're on the ground, now you get an opportunity to pounce? Is that kind of a mindset that you've heard before? Because that's a great Donald Cowboy Cerrone quote. His
Yeah,
favorite takedown is a knockdown.
I remember that quote, and I agree with it 100%. In my pro debut, I went for a number of takedown attempts that were really just to kind of keep Damone busy. Um, I wasn't very invested in any of them and didn't really follow any of them through. And then got the position that I wanted with them on the cage. And really, takedowns are awesome to have and such a huge tool. But if you think that I'm going to be your typical wrestler where I'm just going to grab on top of somebody and hold them and just sit there and maybe patty cake them up, and that's not it, right? Is I'm going to be going for the finish. Somehow, if they're tying up my hands and I can't hit them very hard, then I'll go for the submission. If I can get good position on them, then I'm going to hit them. And wrestling will certainly help me to do that. But it's also a huge tool as just a feint, right?
Mm.
People know that I'm a good wrestler coming in, and it's easy to sell them on that takedown attempt, and they'll spend a little bit more time than they need to worrying about it. And it's also just something in the back of their mind they have to worry about and stay on top of all the time.
And that's where that mindset comes in, structuring your game plan in layers. And I feel like this is a throwback Thursday, even though today isn't a Thursday, because I'm going to bring up Chuck the Iceman Liddell. And of course, Chuck, Tito, and Randy all fought each other and all fought at the same time. But something that was kind of overlooked earlier in his career, but I think it's really important, is he used wrestling in reverse, meaning he could wrestle, but he really wanted to stand and strike with people. And I think that's kind of what you're describing. You're a great wrestler, and you will probably, still win fights and dominate people on the ground. I mean, I'm sure it's well-rounded, but Chuck's style was people couldn't really take him down. And I've seen that live, that your incredible wrestling also works to keep the fight where you want it to be.
Mm-hmm. That is really the staple of wrestling, is that it allows you to control where the fight takes place. It's the transition. Brazilian jiu-jitsu and ground and pound is what you're doing once you take somebody down. That's not really wrestling. It's a lot of different or a lot of the same movements with your hips maybe, but it's not raw wrestling. Raw wrestling is that transition from the feet to the ground. And that's something that you can't fake, right? There's no substitute for that either. right? You can get good at judo, right? At trips or throws or Muay Thai sweeps. But there's nothing that will ever come close to the same, usefulness and ability as the ability to take somebody from their feet and put them on the ground, especially put them underneath you on the ground.
Well, I mean, that's the wrestling 101 mindset. That's why we see it transition so well to MMA, because you're saying, wrestling isn't just what you do on the ground, which there are aspects of that. But to what you say, there's a lot of nuances that change wrestling. You can no longer purely wrestle on the ground. We've seen really great wrestlers get defeated because there's nuances. Ground and pound changes a lot, as well as
As well
jiu-jitsu.
as being able to be choked. Some high
Yeah.
level accidentally give up their back and get the life choked out of them because they're not paying attention. They think they're wrestling. That's not for MMA, even though it is for wrestling.
And obviously no disrespect to Ben Askren, but I think he also showed when he was willingly one dimensional, and that's not me insulting him. He would go on record. They had video of him either refusing to train striking or just kind of barely, because he wouldn't do it. And of course it worked 18, 19 fights in a row. So there's no disrespect to him. But one of the reasons that 5-second knockout happened is because there was no nuances, right? That the shot was coming. And like you said, you can use your shot to really take somebody down, or you can use it to kind of set up your striking. And Ben didn't have that. Now, there's no disrespect to Ben. Obviously, incredible guy, was very effective.
Wrestler.
Yeah, yeah. But to your point, he got knocked out, then he got choked out because there's aspects of pure grappling that just don't transition to MMA, because in pure grappling you can't get choked out, you can't get kneed in the face. So but at the same time, it's kind of cool that he made it as far as he did, and he was outspoken, and he had his funk style, whatever, funky, and good for him. And I hope more people have careers like his, because he made a lot of money and had a lot of fans, and that's great. But I think it's cool when we're talking shop, just to point out the fact that he was intentionally one dimensional, and that was his style. So it's cool that you're multi dimensional. For you, what's on your shout outs or thank you list? We've already talked about how you're fighting March 18th at the Morgantown Casino. You're super excited to be fighting in your hometown. Is there any other things? Do you have sponsors now that you're pro? I think you probably do. And sort of what are your shout outs going into this big fight where you could advance to 2-0 and start to make a name?
Yeah, so there's plenty of them, and there's certainly plenty of them right here in Morgantown. Joe Mama's is a bar that I worked at all through college, and really kept myself afloat money wise with, and a sponsor of me now. Right, they take care of me really well. The owner Joe is a friend of mine. The manager also is a very good friend of mine, and there's several other bars in town too that I'm very friendly with, just because I was a bouncer for a little bit, and I was a bar back for a long, long time. And I know that's kind of typical, a little bit of an ex-athlete or something. But it's good people, right? I don't ever go down there hardly at all anymore. I think I was back. I went New Year's Eve. I stayed till maybe 5 or 10 minutes after midnight. I was down there. I mean, that was only because my good friends were the band that was playing on stage that night. I am right now in the office of Move Right Performance Therapy, which is a PT clinic in Morgantown that is one of the best places at what they do. They work with a lot of high level athletes trying to either overcome injuries or advance their careers, with the kind of micro changes that need to happen up towards the top. And these guys really take care of me. I'm so thankful for them because I'm 31, right? I'm not a spring chicken, but I'm still in the middle of a good career, and these guys keep me as healthy as I could possibly be. I mean, my body feels better than it did when I was wrestling in college, and it works better now too, because of what these guys are doing. They have a couple of recovery options here too. A cold plunge, the Normatec pads, a sauna, a sensory deprivation float tank. That thing is great. And these guys keep me running, to be honest. Move Right. So you should check them out if you're in the area. Let's see. City Neon is a place that does my signs, my banners, actually. since I am here and Move Right has one of my banners, I'll walk on out here. There's a
Perfect.
beautiful shot of the clinic, the gym, and everything. And then if we look up on the wall, who do we see? It's me again.
Oh,
Right? Fun stuff. And City Neon made that banner, which is very nice. And I'm sure we'll have some more of them here in time. Buffalo, or not Buffalo Wild Wing, B3 Bacon Bourbon and Beer is a restaurant that is located here in Morgantown and also just outside of the casinos in Washington, where we had a little after party after the last show, after my pro debut. And we're actually going to have probably a pre kind of party, a post weight cut party, if you will, at B3 here, probably the Friday before I fight. So March 17th, we'll be doing something at B3 in Morgantown. So stay tuned for that.
well, that's real. That's really cool. And a special appreciation for me goes out to all the local businesses that support local fighters. Way before fighters get to the point of being nationally known, they need those local businesses. And part of the local businesses supporting local fighters is for fans of Tom Kizer and other local fighters to support businesses that support fighters, whether it be the people you kind of ran down. That's all very, very important. It's also kind of cool with your focus because you said your body's feeling better than when you were in college, but you're also way more intentional than you were when you were in college. You were an athlete, you were obviously focused, but like you said, you're doing more recovery, you're putting more work in, you're putting more effort in. As always, it's an absolute honor to have you on the show. I love following your career. Best skills to you come March 18th. And for everyone out there, follow Tom Kizer. This is a great opportunity to see him fight in person, and follow him on all the social medias. That way you can see updates on the pre-fight party and all those things. Tom, thanks so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Luke.
You got it.
Yes.
Have a good one.
All right.